I never thought I'd be the kind of father who got played for a fool. But there I was, 70 years old with calloused hands and an aching back, sitting in Kenneth's dim apartment, staring at a computer screen that was dismantling 2 years of hope, one video clip at a time. "I'm sorry you have to see this," Kenneth said quietly. He was maybe 5 years younger than me, a retired postal worker with the kind of steady, honest face that reminded me of the men I grew up with in Oklahoma, the men who meant what they said and said what they meant. On the screen, Brandon, my only son, was carrying cases of beer into his apartment. The timestamp read 3 weeks ago, 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. A Tuesday afternoon when he should have been in advanced thermodynamics or whatever engineering class he told me about over the phone. "There's more," Kenneth said, and clicked to another file. This time it was Brandon washing a silver Audi in the parking lot, laughing with a blonde woman in expensive sunglasses. I recognized that laugh, the same one he'd had as a boy when he got away with something. The camera caught him kissing her before they drove off together. My chest felt tight. "How long have you been recording this?" "The complex installed cameras 6 months ago after some break-ins," Kenneth explained. "I didn't mean to spy, Mr. Thompson, but I've heard you mentioned Brandon talks on the phone outside sometimes, tells people about his generous old man in Oklahoma. When I pieced together that you were sending him money for school," he trailed off, looking genuinely pained. "I'm a father too. I had to tell you." I watched 3 more clips. Brandon at a restaurant that looked far too expensive for a struggling student. Brandon carrying shopping bags from stores I'd never dreamed of entering. Brandon stumbling home drunk at 4 in the morning with a group of people who looked like they'd never worked an honest day in their lives. The last clip was dated just 5 days ago. Brandon stood in the parking lot on his phone, and Kenneth had somehow enhanced the audio. I heard my son's voice clearly. "Yeah, the money just keeps coming. I told him I needed extra for lab fees this semester. Old man believed every word. He's so desperate for me to succeed. He doesn't ask questions." The person on the other end said something I couldn't make out, and Brandon laughed. "Please. He's living in that tiny house in the middle of nowhere, working at a hardware store at 70 years old. What's he gonna do, drive down here and yell at me? He won't risk losing me. I'm all he's got." Kenneth paused the video. I sat there in the silence, feeling like someone had reached into my chest and crushed something vital. All he's got. The words echoed in my head. Was that really how Brandon saw me? As some desperate old man too pathetic to deserve the truth? "Mr. Thompson?" Kenneth's voice seemed to come from far away. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting. "Thank you for showing me this. I mean that. What are you going to do?" I looked at him, this stranger who'd shown me more respect in 20 minutes than my own son had in 2 years. "I'm going to talk to him, tonight." Kenneth nodded. "He's home. I saw him go in about an hour ago." I walked across the parking lot to Building C, Unit 214. My heart was hammering, and I felt lightheaded, but I kept putting one foot in front of the other. The November air in Austin was warm compared to Oklahoma, and the complex looked expensive. Manicured lawns, a pool with fancy lighting, a fitness center I could see through glass doors. All of this on my dime. I knocked on Brandon's door. Music was playing inside, something with heavy bass that rattled the windows. The door opened, and there was my son, 32 years old, wearing clothes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. He had his mother's dark hair and my build, or what my build used to be before age and hard work wore me down. His face registered shock, then something like annoyance. "Dad, what are you doing here? Can I come in?" He actually hesitated before letting his own father into his apartment, then stepped aside. The place was immaculate in that way that spoke of a recent frantic cleaning. Expensive furniture, a massive TV, gaming equipment I didn't recognize. On the kitchen counter, I saw bottles of liquor that cost more than I made in a day. "You should have called," Brandon said, lowering the music. "I would have cleaned up more." "Looks pretty clean to me, clean and expensive." He caught the tone in my voice. "Dad, I can explain. Your neighbor showed me the security footage." The color drained from his face. For just a moment, I saw something that might have been shame. Then his expression hardened into defensiveness. "Kenneth? That nosy old bastard had no right—" "Don't." My voice came out harder than I intended. "Don't you dare make this about him. He did what a decent person does. He told me the truth. Something you haven't done in a long time." Brandon crossed his arms. "So what? You drove all the way here to yell at me?" I drove here for your birthday. I had a present in the car, a new graphing calculator because you mentioned yours was broken. I watched his face. Except you don't need a calculator for classes you're not taking, do you? Silence. The kind that confirms everything. When did you drop out? I asked quietly. I didn't drop out. I'm just taking a break. How long? Does it matter? Yes, Brandon. It matters to me. It matters a great deal. He sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable. A year? Maybe 14 months. 14 months, more than half the time I'd been sending money. I felt dizzy and sat down on his expensive couch without being invited. Did you ever plan to tell me? Eventually, yeah, when I figured out what I wanted to do instead. Instead? I looked around the apartment. What exactly are you doing, son? Besides spending my retirement money on parties and cars and God knows what else? I'm figuring my life out, his voice rose. Not everyone has to follow the same path, Dad. Not everyone wants to work themselves to death at some dead-end job in a town that time forgot. The words hit like a slap, a dead-end job. That job had fed him, clothed him, put him through high school. That town had raised him after his mother died, had supported us through the hardest years of our lives. That dead-end job, I said slowly, is paying for all of this, every bit of it. I didn't ask you to send the money. You absolutely did. You called me crying 2 years ago, begging for one more chance. You said engineering was your calling. You said you'd finally found your purpose, and I believed you, Brandon. I wanted so badly to believe you'd turned a corner. He looked away. I thought I had, but it was harder than I expected, and I needed a break. A break that involves luxury cars and expensive dinners and parties every weekend? You don't understand. Everyone here has money. If I don't keep up, I'm nobody. I have connections now, Dad. Networking. That's worth something. I stared at my son and barely recognized him. When had he become this person? This stranger who measured worth in connections and keeping up appearances? Your mother would be heartbroken, I said quietly. His face flushed. Don't bring Mom into this. Why not? She's the reason I've kept trying with you. She believed you were better than this. She made me promise before the cancer took her that I'd never give up on you, that I'd always be there to help you find your way. My voice cracked. I've kept that promise. Even when you dropped out the first time. Even when you got fired from 3 jobs in a row. Even when you disappeared for 6 months and I didn't know if you were alive or dead. I kept believing because she asked me to. Brandon's jaw was clenched, but he didn't respond. But this, I continued, lying to me month after month, taking money you know I can barely afford to send. Using my love for you as a weapon? She wouldn't recognize you either. Fine. His voice was cold now. So, what do you want? You want me to say I'm sorry? I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry I'm not the son you wanted. I'm sorry I couldn't be perfect like you needed me to be. Perfect? I almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. Brandon, I never needed you to be perfect. I just needed you to be honest, to try, to show me that you gave a damn about something other than yourself. I do give a damn. I'm just trying to survive here, to make something of myself in my own way. On my dime? I stood up, my hands shaking. You want to make your own way? Fine. Make it. But not with money I earned breaking my back at 70 years old. Not with lies and manipulation. He stared at me, and I could see the calculation in his eyes. He was trying to figure out if I was serious, if this was just anger that would blow over. The money stops, I said. Today, right now. Dad, come on. I mean it, Brandon. Not another dollar until you prove to me that you're serious about your life. Get a job, a real one, pay your own rent, and if you want to go back to school, you save for it yourself, or you take out loans like everyone else, but I'm done enabling this. His expression shifted from shock to anger. You're seriously going to cut me off? Your own son? I'm trying to save my son. The one I know is still in there somewhere, underneath all this. I gestured at the apartment, at him, at everything. The boy who used to help me in the workshop, who built a treehouse for the neighbors' kids just because he wanted to see them smile, who sat with his mother every day during chemo and read to her when she was too weak to hold a book. For just a second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Memory, maybe, or regret. But then it was gone, replaced by cold resentment. Get out, he said quietly. Brandon, I said get out. You drove all this way to tell me I'm a disappointment. Fine. Message received, now leave. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, this stranger I no longer knew, and felt a grief deeper than I'd felt since Patricia died. But underneath the grief was something else, something solid. The certainty that I was doing the right thing, even if it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. "Happy birthday, son," I said softly, and walked to the door. "Don't expect me to call," he shouted after me. "Don't expect anything from me anymore." I paused in the doorway, my hand on the frame. "I expect you to become the man your mother believed you could be. Whether that takes a month or a decade, I'll be waiting. But I won't be funding your excuses anymore." I closed the door on his angry face and walked back through that expensive complex, past the pool and the fitness center and the perfect lawns, back to my 20-year-old truck in the visitor parking. Kenneth was standing by his door, concern written all over his face. "You okay, Mr. Thompson?" "No," I said honestly, "but I will be." I drove out of Austin as the sun was setting, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and purple. My phone rang 3 times, Brandon's number, but I didn't answer. Whatever he had to say, he could say it when he was ready to speak truth instead of manipulation. Somewhere outside Waco, I pulled into a rest stop and sat in the darkness, finally letting the tears come. I cried for my son, for my wife, for the 2 years of hope I just watched burn to ashes on a computer screen. But I also cried with a strange sense of relief. The lying was over, the pretending was done. Whatever happened next would be built on truth, however painful. My phone buzzed, a text from Brandon. "Fine. You want to abandon me like everyone else? Go ahead. See if I care." I almost responded, almost typed out that I wasn't abandoning him, that this was love, that he'd understand someday. But I stopped myself. Words wouldn't reach him right now, only consequences would. Instead, I turned off my phone, tilted my seat back, and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, I'd drive the rest of the way home. Tomorrow, I'd figure out what came next. But tonight, in this rest stop between my old life and whatever was coming, I just needed to breathe. The hardest part was done. I'd set the boundary. Now I had to live with it and pray that somewhere down the line it would make the difference his mother always believed it could. The first month without sending that $2,000 felt like withdrawal. Every time the 15th rolled around, the day I'd always made the transfer, my hand would hover over my phone, ready to check if Brandon had called. He never did. I threw myself into work at Miller's Hardware on Main Street. The owner, a man named Derek who'd known me for 30 years, noticed I was taking extra shifts. "You okay, Gary?" he asked one December morning while we were restocking paint supplies. "Just keeping busy," I said. He studied me with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Heard from Brandon lately?" Small towns. Everyone knows everything. I'd mentioned my son to Derek over the years. Probably bragged too much about the engineering degree that never was. "We're taking a break from each other," I said carefully. Derek nodded slowly. "Sometimes that's the most loving thing you can do." I wasn't sure I believed that yet, but I appreciated him not pushing. Christmas came and went. I put up Patricia's old decorations by myself. The ceramic nativity she'd collected piece by piece, the stockings she'd embroidered with our names. I hung Brandon's stocking too, though it stayed empty. On Christmas Eve, I sat in church, listening to Pastor Joel preach about the prodigal son, and I had to excuse myself halfway through. The parallels were too raw. In January, my daughter-in-law, well, ex-daughter-in-law, called. Melissa had divorced Brandon 4 years ago, and I didn't blame her one bit, but she'd always been kind to me. "Gary, I heard about what happened," she said. "I wanted you to know you did the right thing. Doesn't feel right. I know, but Brandon's been coasting on other people's goodwill his whole life. Someone needed to finally say no." She paused. "For what it's worth, when we were married, I tried. I begged him to take responsibility, to stop expecting everyone else to fix his problems. He wouldn't listen. Maybe he'll listen now." "Maybe," I said, though I had my doubts. "And Gary, take care of yourself. You've spent so much of your life taking care of him. Don't forget you matter too." After we hung up, I sat with those words. Don't forget you matter too. When had I forgotten that? Probably around the time Patricia got sick, and I'd poured everything into being strong for her, then strong for Brandon after she passed. There hadn't been room for my own needs. February brought ice storms that knocked out power for 3 days. I helped neighbors check on elderly folks, shared my generator with Natasha and Eric next door who had a new baby. In the darkness and cold, there was something clarifying about simple acts of service. No complicated motives, just people helping people because it was right. My phone stayed silent. No calls from Brandon, no texts, nothing. Then, in mid-March, something unexpected happened. I was closing up the hardware store one evening when a young man came in, maybe 25, looking anxious. He needed a specific type of valve for his water heater that had burst. We didn't have it in stock, but I knew Miller's in the next town over would. I called my friend Sean, who worked there, confirmed they had one, and the young man, his name was Tyler, looked almost tearful with relief. "Thank you," he said. "I don't know what I would have done. My wife just had surgery, and we can't afford a plumber, and I've been trying to fix this myself." "You know how to install it?" I asked. I watched some videos online. I looked at this kid, barely older than Brandon, trying so hard to take care of his family. Something shifted in my chest. "Tell you what," I said. "I get off in 10 minutes. Why don't I drive over with you to get that valve and I'll help you install it? No charge." Tyler's eyes widened. "I couldn't ask you to—" "You didn't ask, I'm offering. We drove to the next town, got the valve, and then went to his small rental house where his wife, Kayla, was resting on the couch. I spent 2 hours in their cramped basement, helping Tyler fix that water heater, teaching him as we went so he'd know how to handle it next time. When we finished, Kayla insisted on making us coffee, and the three of us sat in their tiny kitchen. They were so young, so earnest, struggling to make ends meet, but doing it together with love and determination. Tyler worked 2 jobs. Kayla was a nurse. They were saving for a house, planning for children, building a life brick by brick. Driving home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the contrast. Here was Tyler, barely making it, but refusing to take shortcuts or ask for handouts. And there was Brandon, who'd had every advantage, every opportunity, and had squandered it all. But there was something else too. Helping Tyler had filled something in me that had been empty for months. Purpose, connection, the simple satisfaction of using what I knew to make someone's life better. I started saying yes to more things. When the church needed someone to teach a basic carpentry class for teens, I volunteered. When the community center's roof leaked, I organized a group of retired guys to patch it. Slowly, without meaning to, I was building a different kind of life, one that didn't revolve around waiting for Brandon to need me. April came, and with it, my 71st birthday. Derek surprised me with a cake at the hardware store. That evening, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Kenneth, Brandon's neighbor, standing there with a sheepish smile. "I was passing through on my way to visit my sister in Tulsa," he said. "Thought I'd stop by." We both knew that was a thin excuse. Tulsa was an hour out of the way, but I invited him in anyway. Over coffee, we talked about everything except Brandon. Kenneth told me about his daughter Lindsay, who was a teacher in Dallas. I told him about the carpentry class I was teaching. Finally, as he was leaving, Kenneth said, "He moved, you know, Brandon, got a smaller apartment, and I've seen him leaving early in the mornings, dressed like he's going to work." My heart jumped. "You sure?" I asked the new tenant in his old unit. Brandon's rent went up and he couldn't afford it. That was back in February. Kenneth put a hand on my shoulder. "I don't know if he's changed, Gary, but I thought you should know he's had to adjust." After he left, I sat with that information. Part of me wanted to call Brandon immediately to find out if he really was working, if he'd learned anything. But another part, the part that had grown stronger over these months, knew that wasn't my place. Brandon had to choose his own path. My job wasn't to rescue him. It was to be ready if he ever genuinely wanted help on honest terms. Summer arrived. The carpentry class ended with a showcase where the teens displayed the birdhouses and small furniture they'd built. One kid, a quiet boy named Corey, whose dad was in prison, had made a jewelry box for his mom. Watching his face light up when she cried happy tears, that was worth more than any amount of money I'd sent to Austin. On a humid July evening, I was sitting on my porch swing, the same one Patricia and I had sat on for 30 years, when my phone rang. Brandon's name lit up the screen. My hand trembled as I answered. "Hello?" "Dad." His voice was different, quieter. "Do you have a minute?" "I do." Silence stretched between us. Then, "I got a job at a construction company. It's just labor, nothing fancy, but it's honest work." I closed my eyes. "That's good, Brandon. I'm glad." "I'm still in Austin. Moved to a cheaper place. I'm trying to save money, to go back to school eventually, maybe not engineering, maybe something else. But I want to finish something for once. That sounds like a plan. More silence. Then, in a voice that cracked, I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it, for lying to you, for using you, for being such a selfish bastard. The tears came before I could stop them. I forgive you, son. Just like that? Just like that. But Brandon, forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to how it was. You understand that? Yeah. He took a shaky breath. I wasn't calling to ask for money. I wanted you to know I'm trying. I don't know if I'll succeed. I might fail again. But I'm actually trying this time. That's all I ever wanted, for you to try, to be honest. We talked for another 20 minutes. He told me about the job, about his coworkers, about how humbling it had been to show up every day at 6 a.m. and do physical labor in the Texas heat. He told me about his tiny efficiency apartment, about learning to cook cheap meals, about watching every dollar. There was this moment, he said, where I was eating ramen for the 4th day in a row, and I thought about all the expensive dinners I'd wasted your money on, and I just broke. I sat on the floor of that apartment and cried like I hadn't cried since Mom died, because I finally got it, Dad. I finally understood what you'd been trying to teach me. What's that? That things don't matter, that status doesn't matter, that what matters is who you are when nobody's watching, whether you're living with integrity. He laughed bitterly. Mom tried to teach me that my whole life. You tried. Melissa tried. But I had to lose everything to actually learn it. Sometimes that's how it works, I said gently. Sometimes we have to hit bottom before we can start climbing back up. Before we hung up, Brandon said, I don't expect you to trust me right away. I know I have to earn that back, but I'm going to, Dad, however long it takes. I believe you, I said, and I realized I meant it. We started talking once a week after that. Short calls, nothing heavy. He'd tell me about work. I'd tell him about the hardware store, about the projects I was working on. Slowly, carefully, we were rebuilding something. Not the old relationship, based on my need to fix him and his willingness to be fixed. Something new, something healthier. In September, Brandon sent me a check for $500. I stared at it for a full minute before calling him. What's this? First payment, he said. On what I owe you. I did the math. $24,000 over 2 years. At $500 a month, it'll take me 4 years to pay you back. Longer if I'm going to school too, but I'll get there. Brandon, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I need to. Please let me do this. I deposited the check. And the next month when another one came, I deposited that too. Not because I needed the money, though it helped, but because I understood this was part of his healing. Part of him reclaiming his self-respect. At Christmas, Brandon asked if he could come home for a few days. I said yes. When I picked him up from the bus station, he'd sold the Audi months ago. I almost didn't recognize him. He was leaner, his face weathered from outdoor work, his hands calloused like mine. He hugged me tight, and I felt the difference in him. The softness was gone. In its place was something solid. We spent Christmas Eve at church together. Pastor Joel preached about grace and second chances, and this time I didn't have to leave. Brandon and I sat side by side in the pew Patricia and I had shared for decades. And when the choir sang Silent Night, I felt her presence. She would have been proud. Not of the perfect son she'd hoped for, but of the real one sitting next to me, the one who'd failed and fallen and was slowly learning to stand back up. On Christmas morning, Brandon gave me a small wrapped package. Inside was a hand-carved wooden box, simple, imperfect, but made with care. But made. I've been taking a woodworking class at night, he explained. Figured I should learn to make something with my hands, something real. I ran my fingers over the rough edges, the uneven corners. It was the most beautiful thing he'd ever given me. There's something inside, he said quietly. I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it and read, Dad, I know I can't give back the years I wasted or the pain I caused, but I can give you this. I promise to live the rest of my life in a way that honors Mom's memory and your faith in me. Not perfectly, I'll still mess up, but honestly, with integrity, the way you've always lived. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself. I love you. Brandon, I couldn't speak. I just pulled my son into my arms and held him while we both cried. 71 years old, and I was still learning that the hardest love, the love that sets boundaries and demands truth, is sometimes the only love that saves. That night, as Brandon slept in his old room and I sat on the porch in the cold December air, I looked up at the stars Patricia and I used to watch together. I thought about the long, painful journey of the past year, the confrontation, the silence, the fear that I'd lost my son forever, the slow, uncertain rebuilding. It wasn't a perfect ending. Brandon still had years of growth ahead of him. There would be setbacks and struggles, but he was trying, really trying, and he was doing it on his own terms, with his own strength, earning back his own self-respect one honest day at a time. And me? I'd learned something too, that my worth wasn't tied to fixing him, that I could love him without enabling him, that sometimes the greatest act of faith is letting go and trusting that the seeds you've planted will eventually grow, even if you can't see them sprouting yet. The wind picked up cold and clean. Inside the house was warm. My son was home, not the son I'd imagined, but the real one. Flawed and trying, broken and healing, and that was enough.